Well, hello and welcome to yet another episode. What number are we at now? We hit 50 quite a while ago, so
Yeah, I
um,
never know until I put it up, but
okay.
70 something,
Um,
maybe 80, maybe even.
that's astonishing. So yes, we're another episode of Literary as Feck with myself, Nick, and himself.
Moses Moo Moo Mazeltov, just to piss off the ghost of Henry Ford, because one thing I discovered from this
Hmm?
book is not only, of course, was he a famous anti-Semite, he's also quite anti-bovine, it turns out, which I didn't
Yes, yes, he
didn't like
definitely
them
had
cows.
no time for the cows. Yes, so we are talking. Oh, it's behind me here on the bed. We are talking this tome here, Fordlandia, The Rise and Fall of Henry Ford's Forgotten Jungle City by Greg Grandin.
Mm. My
Um,
first Greg Grandin book, actually.
yes, me too. And so maybe just before I get on to asking, I'm going to ask you a question here in a second, Clive. But before I do that, I'm going to say, this
I
book was
will
on my.
not marry you, Nick. Sorry, I'm
Oh,
already.
damn it. I hoped that the public, you feel a certain amount of pressure
to accept.
to just accept.
Were you going
Yes.
to get down on one knee because you just disappear out of
Yeah,
frame?
yeah, that was the plan. It was to ask you from below the computer desk
I'd be proposed to by a slightly
by
beckoning
yeah,
head.
thinning head there. Yeah. So
How could I resist?
this book has been on the bookshelf here for quite a while.
Well,
Jen
it's
bought
been
it.
in our videos actually.
Oh yes, it probably has been actually.
Yeah.
Back when we were in the other house. So yeah, Jen bought this book some years back, and my wife has always had a thing for like utopias, reading about them. And it's funny, I've always had a thing for dystopias. Like I gravitated towards your Brave New Worlds and your 1984s and your that stuff. And she did a whole course in university on like utopian fiction. So they read stuff like Erewhon and Herland and a bunch of these kind of I guess within the world of utopian fiction, well-known
Yeah,
utopian
I suppose
novels.
Brave New World kind of starts as utopian, doesn't it?
Right. And
Yeah.
then drift to
Right.
dystopia. Yeah. Um, and so, but also she's been really interested in like the attempted real life applications, right? Maybe even more interested in like the famous failures, right? Like people
Hmm.
who are like have these utopic visions or whatever and go out and try to do something and the way they inevitably kind of come apart. And I find that quite depressing myself. I think because of my history as an anarchist, or being somebody who like I was frightened of reading about all of these attempts
Well,
that inevitably,
I was
come
just
to.
wondering, you said all the failures, and I'm thinking, well, are there any successes? Are there?
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, I mean that would be the question. I would argue tentatively that some of what was going on in Spain during the beginning of the Civil War when the anarchists were in control of Catalonia, but it didn't last terribly long because they didn't win the
Yes,
war.
Utopia would probably be pushing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think they were that was the direction they were pushing. It was a utopian vision that they were
Oh, there's
attempting
plenty of
to
them.
practice.
There's plenty of them, right? There's plenty of people who've. I mean, you could argue that fucking Jonestown started life as a
Also,
utopia village.
this is Jen's interest. Like she believes strongly that the entire USA was basically created by a bunch of people attempting to create their own little utopian colonies free
Right, is,
from
yeah, yeah.
the overweening state power of, the governments in Europe, right? And so whether it's the Kellogg brothers and their Wellville kind of stuff, or whether it's,
Right.
yeah, Henry Ford, we're going to talk about here. Um,
I
but
look
yeah,
forward to reading your missus's book when she's finished it.
I know she's writing a book, but she's just generally
Right.
interested. She was recently listening to a podcast that was about various, again, utopian, projects, right? Things like even like the Disney company, right? They had been building these, or they were attempting to build these weird little planned communities that were very much a kind of attempt to create some sort of like living.
There's always something. Yeah, there's always something deeply suspicious about it, right? Because
Yes,
yeah,
for sure, because it's about control. It's about somebody
exactly.
who wants to control other people's behavior in
Yeah.
some way, right? Um,
And at
So
some
yes,
point, there's always going to be something's always going to enter the picture and going to cause a fray or a
yeah.
split or
Well, one of her favorite books of that she's ever read, and I haven't read it though, is a book about the Biosphere Project, right? Where all of those scientists went into that like dome or whatever it
Oh
was, and
yes. There's a
down maybe in
documentary
Arizona.
or a two about it as well, isn't there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think the book came first, and basically how it just completely toxified, and these two
Yes.
factions formed within, basically because they were all oxygen starved. What turned out was
Yes.
something was wrong, and one group was like, "Well, we need to like basically get away from like we need to like not apply the original plan so strictly because we're going to die," and another group was like, "No, we signed on based on these expectations, and we are going to," and it
Yeah.
just.
I remember Alex Cox, oddly enough, talking about that documentary when he used to do a podcast with that other fellow in Colorado. They discussed
Mhm.
that doc.
Supposed to, yeah. I mean, it might be an interesting thing to at some
Hmm.
point watch. But as I said, Jen said the book was like fascinating. But anyway, so she had bought this, and I was totally unaware that Henry Ford had this kind of double. He had
Card?
he yeah, he had a version of it in the States, and then he had this other version of it in the Amazon, right? Of this kind of semi-utopic planned community thing. But so I guess my question for you, Clive, is
Yes.
what prior knowledge did you bring to this about Henry Ford, and then
Well,
maybe that the like did you know anything? I had no idea about
I did know
Fordlandia.
vaguely about it, and in fact, I even remember at some point pointing it out on the shelf behind you
Okay,
and saying, "Oh, we should do that book one day." And I
okay,
think you totally forgot about it and then reached that conclusion by
my
yourself, right?
independently, right?
Because the reason it was on my radar is because I don't know if it still is. It might be an abandoned project, but for a while there, if you went to Werner Herzog's IMDb page,
Mhm.
it had it as like a in production
Oh, interesting.
documentary version based on that Fordlandia, and I was like, "Huh, what's that?" Went off, heard about the book, put it on my long list of things
Mhm.
to do for this show, and then,
Mhm.
well, you got to it first. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, so I was keen to read it, and yeah, it makes sense because it is basically it's Fitzcarraldo, isn't it? Kind
Oh
of
my
this
God.
story.
It's an act of insane hubris
Yeah.
that I'm looking forward to unpacking a little bit.
It
But I
would have
guess,
been back if he'd have made it back in the 70s. It would be fascinating to see Klaus Kinski's take
oh,
on Henry Ford.
exactly. But so I guess my question is, I realized how little I knew about Henry Ford himself, other than because again, when you read a lot of stuff that comes through a kind of a pro union, pro labor kind of anarcho syndicalist, kind of a thing. Obviously, um, I knew that he was an anti-Semite for sure. I knew that before I read this book, and I knew that he had some pretty unsavory labor practices, and I knew that he'd invented a method of, mass production
Yeah,
that kind of reduced the human being to a machine part and was,
yeah. Employed strike
considered.
breaker. Well, I was quite surprised by that. Not just strike breakers, but like killers.
Oh
Right?
yeah, his guy Bennett,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
his
yeah.
his capo, wherever he was, that guy seems like a real piece of work.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that was my image of him. And that's kind of all I really knew. And and that his name is all over trucks everywhere here in Canada. You can't go anywhere
Yeah.
without
The
being
other
behind
thing I knew a
somebody's
little
blank
bit
hole.
about as well was I forget the artist, but what's her name? Carlo's husband, the guy who did
Mm,
those murals.
Diego Rivera.
Yeah, that are all across Detroit, right?
Yes, yes.
Which are actually kind of quite astounding as well. Like I went off and had a look at some of them, and
Oh, I used to have a huge volume of just all of them that I
hmm,
bought, and then it got mold damaged when I lived on the reserve. But yes, him and the other, yeah, all of the Mexican muralists are kind
I
of
believe
fascinating.
you also got mold damage.
I did get somewhat, yes.
Yes.
Still got an itchy toe as a result. But so yeah, I think. I was just gonna say I really like the fact that you just referred to Diego Rivera as Frida Kahlo's husband.
I forgot his name. That's
Oh, it's great because for so long she kind of labored in his shadow, and I do think that that has actually flipped now. I do think
yeah,
that
I think so
probably
as well.
people know who she is,
Yeah.
but for a long time she was considered to be like the housewife who puttered around with painting, to the
Yeah.
great
Well, I think it
Diego.
helps when someone as glamorous as Penelope Cruz plays you in a film, right? And then,
That doesn't hurt,
yeah.
yes.
So I don't know if who played him in that film. I've not seen that film actually.
No, either. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, he was a pretty short. I think he was a pretty short, stocky little guy, if I memory serves me correctly, kind of a bit Picasso-like. But anyway, um, so yeah, so this was, I think, what was most confusing to me about this is that Ford is a much more confusing person, I think, than I would have imagined.
Yeah, yes, I mean in terms of yes, all that stuff you mentioned, but then yeah, on the other side of the coin, yeah, all these pretty visionary
Yeah.
ideas, right? Like his things, especially the stuff to do with which are actually being done now in terms of the use of soy and stuff like
Yes.
that. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, he was a super early adopter and believer that soy was the answer
Yeah,
to all of
yeah.
life's
But you
problems, right?
mentioned as well the Wellvilles earlier. There's a little bit of that to it as well, the kind of wellness thing, right?
Mhm.
Um, and also the
Yeah.
thing that was interesting as well was his um, his kind of opposition to Teddy Roosevelt as well, and all that stuff was really quite interesting.
And that he was an ardent pacifist. So for a guy who employed murderers and strikebreakers to kill his own workers, he was equally obsessed with the idea of America not going to war, with
Yeah,
trying to get them out of World War One. Would have been, yeah.
yeah. I mean, the good and the bad of that, that the kind of isolationism as well, though, right? But
Yes.
actually, speaking of incredibly strange, conflicted, mercurial men, we might want to read about Teddy Roosevelt one
Right.
day as well, because he's another
Hmm.
person, like on, I mean, so many things. And then the other thing I didn't realize until quite, I didn't realize that that is actually where the teddy bear comes from as well. Actually, it was the teddy bear basically started life as like a
Eddie Roosevelt Bear.
Roosevelt doll. Yeah,
Right.
because he was famous for, wasn't he? There's that picture of, because he was a hunter and he took down the bear, but it was only because like someone had like pegged down the bear so he couldn't escape and then
Right.
shot. There's a whole bunch of fascinating stuff. So we might get to that one day, and then we'll have to watch that because of course John Milius made a film about him, right? Of course,
Okay, yeah.
yeah, which is
Hmm.
interesting.
And then who? Oh, sorry, this is completely an aside, but now you've
That's right. That's
reminded
what
me
we do.
that Winnie the Pooh, of course, is named after Winnipeg, the city of Winnipeg, where I lived quite close to.
Which is full of poo.
It's
Uh,
just yeah, actually, yes, it is.
well, uh, the drill and bass artist Venetian Snares once did release an album called Winnipeg is a Frozen Shithole, which is where
Yeah,
it's from. So I don't know.
that seems absolutely fair. But yeah, no, apparently the bear was on loan from the Winnipeg Zoo or whatever and was in England, and it was called like Winnie because it was from Winnipeg, and A.A. Milne happened to be there with his kid and saw the bear, and there you go.
Did not know
But
that.
anyway, back to this. So yeah, so I mean, I was, it was amazing to me that yes, on the one hand, he has this thing where he's dedicatedly anti-union. He hates any kind of organization, hates any kind of government control, right? Rails against any sort of checks and balances on what he's doing with his business, but also is like, no, I am going to pay people for their work, like a proper wage.
Right.
I'm going to have them in decent housing. I'm going to have them all have their own gardens, although that seemed a bit prescriptive. Like you will have your own garden
Yeah,
and
well,
you
that's
will
the
grow your
yeah.
own food.
He
Um,
oversteps it as well, doesn't he? Because he's like he sends spies around to make sure people aren't going out drinking, that they're going to church, and that kind
yeah.
of yeah.
But
No,
then, I think he very much believes that technology is going to, you know, be a great emancipator in a way, but then reduces people to machine parts and also
he's very much the original tech bro, isn't he? Actually,
he is totally Zuckerberg and Musk and all of those guys. And if anything, yeah, they're all him. That's really was a big takeaway for me. Was
Plus a hatred of cows.
you know, as well, why wouldn't you? um, yeah, so I guess I mean the basic the nucleus of this really is that so Ford at some point has this idea that he doesn't want to be dependent on rubber that's coming from this British monopoly, right? So at
Hmm.
this point, like the British Empire has a kind of a monopoly on the rubber trade because this really I want to know more about Henry Wickham. This guy called Henry Wickham, who's like an imperial rogue and kind of spy, sort of one of these figures,
Hmm.
goes down to Brazil, steals a bunch of rubber seeds, smuggles them out of the country, and then they plant them all over Southeast Asia, where they get these like high yielding rubber plantations,
Hmm.
which because there's no native species of insect or plant that kind of parasitize them are actually better than the ones that they have in the Amazon, right?
Right.
They're producing more. So, but in any case, Ford is like, no, we're gonna make our own rubber so we can have our own tires. So we're going to yeah, open up our own town and our own plantations in the middle of the Amazon jungle.
Hmm.
And this is the story of that absolute insane
Yeah.
hubris
Oh yeah,
of
and not just, not just like an outpost like where people would have to adapt to life as it was. No, no, no. We're gonna have electricity and plumbing and paved roads and
yeah, a
public
dance
houses,
hall,
dance halls and
church,
churches
a
and yeah.
hospital.
And it's
Yeah.
amazing. It is that kind of, like you said, it is that hubris which is fascinating. It's when you read, it's something that we're so far removed from now. Like
Mhm.
in most, you know, right thinking people would never would never dream that big now, right?
Right.
Yes, we
Yeah.
shall build a city. It's like
We will bring civilization to the Amazon basin.
it is absolutely because even if you started thinking about just the if you started thinking about the technicalities of just like the plumbing or something, oh, you'd get a fucking headache like immediately, right? And yeah, so it's on the one hand, it's just foolhardy, but on the other hand, there's a slight hats off kind of
Yes, you have
big
to
sky
admire.
thinking, which is quite impressive that they just yes, we can do that, no problem at all. And then
Yeah,
on top of that, there's just the basic kind of
madness of the idea.
yeah. But then what I've the most fascinating stuff in the book for me was
Mhm.
the stuff about the technicalities of how rubber plants grow and the ecosystem and how they're
Yeah.
tied into other things. That's stuff that didn't even
So what I
I mean,
love
even a little bit. It was just plant some trees and then we'll get the rubber done.
that's what I so yeah. The idea that they were like, should we send anyone who knows anything about botany or
Yeah.
entomology? No, no.
No.
Send down the mechanics who've been building our stuff up in Michigan.
Yes.
They're engineers, they'll figure it out.
Yes. It
Um,
reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you've ever seen that Errol Morris documentary, Mr. Death, where it's about a guy who basically perfected the electric chair in the United
yes.
States.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, he knows about death and stuff. So basically, he got kind of co-opted by people who wanted to prove that the Holocaust didn't happen.
Yes.
Sent him off to like take sample, and he just doesn't know what he's doing, right? And but they seem
Mhm.
to think, yeah, he's Mr. Death, right? So
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's just that yeah, that's where the hubris of it really fascinates me. Where even like the idea of like, should we talk to any of the indigenous folks who've been
of
doing this
course
for
not. No,
centuries? Oh
no,
no, what would they possibly know about yeah.
yeah,
So everything they do wrong. And then just this idea of all these like wide-eyed, you know, folks coming down who would just have no idea how to deal and bringing their wives and children down to the green hell, to the
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
inferno that endless Ruggero Deodato films are set in, right?
It reminds me a lot as well of the stupid people in Orwell's Burmese days, right? Like
Right.
you don't belong. The Pukka Sahib does not belong here, right? Like, and
Mhm.
yeah, just that whole idea of adapt adapting the whole place to your own
Mhm.
standards, right? Like, no, we will dance the Charleston in the town hall or something. Like,
Right.
well, that's
Yeah.
interesting as well. The fact that they had that entire like they had like a radio station and stuff like that,
Yes.
and how that kind of impacted, like, that was kind of interesting as well. I would have liked to have a bit more into that, how that kind of impacted the indigenous people
Hmm.
a little bit, because they were hearing this music for the first time and then they started kind of adopting it and stuff like that. Yeah, which, so that brings me to the slight thing with this book. I'm still not
Hmm.
sure about it. I'm wondering what you think about it. Because on the one hand, I just did mention that I would have liked to have had more detail.
Hmm.
On the other hand, like, there's no lack of detail. It's not a book. It's a very interesting read, and it's, I don't know how many pages it is, but it's quite a large book, right?
Hmm.
And it certainly doesn't feel it doesn't feel like some books we've read where they've kind of flesh out the main conceit with other
Right.
stuff that doesn't really belong there.
Hmm.
This all feels very much of a piece, but also at the same time, I was like, I don't know. I don't know. It feels a little bit as if I should have read like a massive multi-volume
Right.
history of Henry Ford
Hmm.
with
Yes.
Fordlandia as a sizable chunk of it.
Yes.
Right? Do you know what I mean? So I'm not sure
No,
if,
no, I agree. I
yeah,
do feel like that. It comes in like with him established. We don't
right.
get any of that. You
There's enough.
know.
I mean, there's enough. Like, well, we learned stuff about him, like we said, right? But I don't know. It
Mhm.
just seems a little bit like, I don't know, if I'd have put in a little bit more effort, I would have just, yeah, read the three, if there's such a thing as a 3 volume. I'm sure there is,
Mhm.
history of Henry Ford and Fordland. I don't know if that's it. Or maybe they do skip over it. Maybe that's why. Maybe Greg Grandin did his homework. Maybe he realized, oh, there is no substantial volume specifically on Fordlandia, and maybe that's why
Yes.
he wrote it, right? Because he
Hmm.
does seem to pick interesting topics, right?
Hmm.
And on the strength of this, I would read another Greg Grandin book, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a part I wanted to read it. I made a note here. From as I said, what I found
Oh,
fascinating was all
I thought you were leaning over there. I thought you were going to go over to the organ and
yes, give you
you
a
were going to
little
sing it. Yes.
yes, yes, very Terry Gilliam. Hang on, page 197. It was just
Oh,
any of these.
sorry, you mentioned Gilliam. The
Yes.
one thing I didn't have a chance to watch as well. There's a Michael Palin, Brazil with Michael Palin, one of his travel series,
Oh,
and he goes to Fordlandia.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that. Um, Many of the Americans, though, did not welcome their posting to the Amazon. The jungle pressed heavy on them with its incessant rains that gave way to baking sun. It was like living in a steam bath, thought Constance Perini. So may remember the Perinis. They're that like Italian American couple, and he's sent down to like he
Oh
only
yeah.
lasts 2 weeks. The whole family just completely unravels. He gets edema and all this other stuff. But anyway, there were flying bugs with claws just like lobsters, heat rashes and sunburns, insect bites, ticks, skin funguses, and dysentery. The Ford staff was introduced to an array of minor pests bearing strange names, such as pumes, small biting black flies, as well as minuscule fleas that dug underneath fingernails, leaving their eggs to fester and infect the skin. At night, vampire bats often worked their way past window screens to feed, and since their razor-sharp incisors could painlessly pierce flesh, the Americans would sleep through an attack, waking to find their toes and ankles bloodied. And if malaria didn't get you, then the nightmares brought on by the daily quinine. So Jen asked me this: is that how you say this? Is it quinine or quinine?
I would go quinine, but
Me
that's because
too.
it sounds, that's more to my taste.
Yeah, but I honestly don't know if I've ever heard it actually read aloud
Mm.
in anything. But anyway, whatever it is, um, dope every day was how Mulroney remembered the prophylactic. Yeah, just the absolute agony that these people completely unsuited to this place, you
Well,
know.
speaking of the quinine as well, it's another interesting aspect as well, because they're like insisting on doling it out as well, right? Like the
Yes.
local people who don't even want it, right?
Yes.
They just throw it away. And
I did also like that when they build a local hospital, then suddenly everyone's families like start like extended family, like great great grandmother suddenly they're also living
right.
on in the Fordlandia, and they're like, oh
Well,
Jesus,
I'm quite interested in the quinine as well because it seems like yeah, the whole thing about it giving you extreme nightmares is quite
nightmares. Yeah.
fascinating. I don't think I've ever been treated to quinine.
No, no, I don't think I have either. Um, did also like all of the awful, awful shit about how bad a dad Ford was. That is that this whole weird passive aggression and like direct aggression towards his son, who he nominally gave the company to, Edsel, right?
Right.
And then does everything he can to basically undermine him, humiliate him, like.
I mean,
But
how much can you expect? Like, yeah, like we say, these guys with their big hubristic ideas, like there's only so much time in the day. Clearly, they're leaving like families starved of attention
right.
and affection and love, right? I'm sure that's pretty much the story. I mean, yeah, isn't that we were talking about the tech bros? Isn't one of Elon Musk's daughters
Oh yeah, she
being
hates him.
transgender
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
goes on
She
about,
she
yeah,
constantly, like, whenever he says anything
a
ridiculous or
shitty
stupid,
human being.
she's right in
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So this is again, this is almost like a footnote in this book, but immediately made me go, "What is this? What?" So during the like in the run up to the Civil War, that the U.S. like the southern U.S. basically we're seriously considering. Well, what if we just moved all the slave plantations to Brazil, to the Amazon? And then
Mm,
we to have a civil war, we could just have the whole US South be further south,
right.
and that it seriously floated. And that then after the war, a bunch of them did flee down. What the fuck is it with Brazil and like South America with like white supremacists deciding like that's the place to be after your little Reich falls,
Right. Right. I think that might even be where what's his face? Oh yeah, Hitler got the idea of, let's move all the Jews to Madagascar. I think that the seeds of that
possibly,
idea, right?
possibly, yeah.
Because again, big sky thinking, right? Yeah, that'd be easy. I suppose in
We
some
could do
ways
that.
we still have this ridiculous idea with the fucking Rwanda bill in the UK, right? Where they're thinking of sending all,
Oh, right.
immigrants off to be to be to be processed in Rwanda. What a surprise! Not one plane has taken off yet. And there was that one guy, right, who got on the plane, and it turned out he'd been paid to get on the
Right.
plane. Um, yeah.
And I think the other thing that struck me as well was just how the book is kind of, in a way, like, or at least the sections dealing with Brazil are bookended by this shit that is almost, or maybe not even almost, that is like B. Traven style, like,
Hmm.
mahogany jungle, total degradation and exploitation of indigenous people at a level that you're just like, holy shit. And then Ford kind of comes in and he does try, I mean, the company, he never, well, Jen didn't know because she's actually not ever finished the book. She didn't know he never goes there too, which is also fascinating. There's
Oh
this
yeah, yeah.
idea
No,
everyone's
never.
waiting
Yeah.
for the day that like the man from Del Monte will come
Yeah.
and say
Yeah.
yes.
I wonder if the man from Del Monte is based on Henry Ford.
Maybe.
Is it him or Godot, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. There's something very existential about the whole thing about, yeah, him like they're all waiting that one day Ford will grace us with his presence, but he never does
The man
eventually.
from Del Monte, he say, fucking hell, this place is a mess.
Exactly. So yeah, no, that and then just like and then it goes right back to that. Like literally as soon as it's all shut down, it's right back to like the local feudal barons basically sending people out to, you know, uh gather whatever tiny amounts of rubber they can and then paying
Yeah.
them a pittance.
I have a theory actually that the man from Del Monte by day, milk tray man by night.
He does, that the man from that it does seem like a kind of a spy type of thing.
You know who the milk tray man was, right? You know who played him?
Uh wasn't it what's his face from the Fulci movies?
It is. It's David Warbeck.
David Warbeck. Yes, yeah. Which apparently he was on the shortlist for James Bond at one
I
point.
can see that, yes. And according to Alan Jones, through the finest orgies in London.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I would, I mean, he seems like a personable guy, but he doesn't seem that magnetic. But better than those thrown by the great P. Diddy. He's in all kinds of trouble right now. What was it? What was it? 10,000 bottles of baby oil, whatever they found in his house, something like that.
Oh, I haven't been following that closely.
Oh yeah, that's yeah. He's in some serious trouble at the moment.
But there was another interesting aside. Do you know oh fucking I forget the name now. Fuck it, this is no good because I can't remember the name. There's a well actually I suppose I could still tell the story. There's a
Mhm.
famous musician. It's two people actually. I think it's a Dutch chick and another guy,
Mhm.
and they collaborate under his name, and he also releases Is This Ringing a Bell?
Vaguely.
And they seem to always be in like clouds of pot smoke in all their
Okay. Hmm.
publicity photos. Anyway, I was reading, he was talking about a party, extremely exclusive party he was asked to DJ for, like a proper exclusive on some island party. And the thing is, a Hype Williams, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
Hype Williams could, of course, just be entirely trolling us all.
Yeah.
It would fit the brand. But he talks about DJing this exclusive island party, yeah, where basically he was playing music while, women were hunted through the jungle, just like that story we read by
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yes.
that kind of thing, like not killed or anything, but like
Right.
maybe like
Right.
pinked bald or yeah. um
Wow.
so that's
That would be a weird gig. That'd be a strange thing to be asked to provide
what
music
would
for.
you play? Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Think about
Hmm.
it, wouldn't you?
Huh.
I suppose
Uh,
you'd have to at some point slip in the last known survivor strikes his play in the
ah,
night.
yes. That and the William Tell Overture should probably go in there somewhere as
Yeah,
well.
but again,
Uh,
that's the kind of thing maybe Greg Grantine will write a book about that
please do.
day.
But yeah, no, I have to say overall, I enjoyed this quite a bit. I think
Yeah,
this
I
was
did. I did.
definitely learned quite a bit of stuff I didn't already know.
I
It
think
gave me
what I
a more nuanced understanding of Henry Ford. He's in many ways worse than I thought, but also better.
right.
Yeah,
I
but
think
not
I
on one note, I
I
guess.
think the thing with it was, and this isn't the book's fault. I think this is me bringing certain baggage to it. Was I thought it would be heftier and more weighty than it was, but because
Hmm.
it concentrates on this very specific thing, it was a slightly more digestible and not lightweight exactly, but it was a more of a brisk kind of
Hmm.
a, less of a like a monumental read, which I was expecting. But that's not a
Right.
bad thing by
Hmm.
any means. And it was just, yeah, I don't know why I expected that, because when you see it, when you hold up that hardcover, for example, I mean, it looks like,
It does look,
yeah,
yeah, it's a
but it's kind of actually,
quite readable. Yeah, it was
yeah,
quite
yeah.
breezy in a way. Yeah.
I don't remember reading something that looks that size. So
Right.
I don't know if
Right.
that's very large print, that version you have or something. Or,
Well, no, I think that's regular. Yeah. But
um,
no, because it is it reads quite quickly. So, but
yeah.
yeah, no, I'm glad. It's always nice to throw in the occasional piece of nonfiction. I think
Oh
as
yeah, definitely. No, good stuff. Definitely worth a read.
hmm
I wonder if Werner Herzog or someone will actually get round to making that
hmm
film or doc one day.
hmm
Um, right.
Okay,
Till then.
toodle pip.